Hello, listeners, and welcome to a new episode of the Games We Love podcast. I'm your host, Aaron White, and The Games We Love is a show that promotes positive gaming discussion through interviews and conversations with passionate gamers, including journalists, developers, podcasters, streamers, critics, and other diehard video game fans about a personal favorite game that they love. In this episode of the podcast, I am thrilled to introduce you all to today's guest, someone I look up to greatly. He is the original founder of OK Beast, now a host for Kinda Funny Games, and one of the premier voices in games journalism, Blessing Adeoye Jr.
What's up, man? How's it going? First of all, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that.
You are welcome. You know, I gotta tell you, it's because I've watched you kind of blossom from an at-home podcaster, just like I am, and I've been doing for 4 or 5 years now, and we've watched you grow and take your craft to a bigger audience, and you clearly have a gift for that. The gift of
Thanks,
gab,
man.
if you would. And so I'm going to tell you straight, not to pile on the sweet stuff, but all of my friends that locally listen to Kinda Funny, everybody has been incredibly thrilled with your addition to the group. I mean,
that's awesome.
We love you. And so it's just an honor to talk to you, man. But I want to start off by just getting to know you a little bit and finding out about your history. And to start, this is kind of a big opening question. So, you know, you can go wherever you want to go with this.
Is
but
there a God?
Well, I wasn't going to go that far, but we could talk about your past with that if you want. No. What's your journey like as it comes to gaming? Going all the way back, kind of start with when did you start gaming? Atari? And, where was it?
All the way back.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been playing video games for as long as I remember, right? Like as a kid, I guess the earliest age I probably even slightly remember was when I was 4 years old. And even then, I remember having an N64 and my first games being Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey and Mario 64.
Nice.
And I was just obsessed, right? It was a thing for me to kind of go to as a kid to kind of get lost and have a good time with. And Mario 64 especially was a game that I fell in love with and really had a whole journey with. Of course, I had 3 older sisters who would also play Mario 64 with me, but I was the main kid in the family obsessed with it. And I remember getting to the end of it. You get to the final fight with Bowser where they're playing all the organs and you're I think it's called Bowser in the Sky, that final level. And I remember hiding under the bed at 4 years old and giving my sister the controller to try and beat Bowser because I was scared, and 2, I couldn't figure out how to beat him because you had to get him 3 times as opposed to before where you only had to get him once. And so that was kind of the game that kind of ushered me into the idea that, man, I really enjoy this. I really love this. And then I guess as time progressed, right? At a certain point I got a PS2 and I got Shadow of the Colossus and Metal Gear Solid 3, and those games really kind of blew my mind because Metal Gear Solid 3 was my first experience with a Metal Gear Solid game, and that was 3 was the game that I would say introduced me to the idea that video games could be video games can be a really amazing storytelling medium, right? I latched onto those characters, latched onto those moments, found myself really into Big Boss's relationship with the boss, which sounds ridiculous if you haven't played.
unless you know the lore, yeah.
Yeah, but then Shadow of the Colossus on the other side, right? Really introduced me to the idea that video games can be a work of art, and video games can be this beautiful thing. Video games can have a unique setup, right? That really take you through an emotional journey through not only just gameplay, but through visuals and through having a beautiful score, right? And having a beautiful message and all this stuff. And so from then on, I think that had a large part into ushering me into my obsession. And then there are plenty of other games, right? Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was another game that I got obsessed with. And even from a cultural perspective, right? I found myself latching on to Grand Theft Auto San Andreas because I felt like I could relate to the characters, not in the sense that I was a gangster or anything like that, because I've never been a gangster in my life, but in the sense that these are characters that are not only black, but in terms of the way they talk, in terms of the music they listen to, in terms of the way they interact with the people that are around them, right? I remember being man, I never had that explicit moment of this is something different, but my whole experience with San Andreas, I think, was latching onto it because it was something that felt unique to me and something that felt like I could connect to more so than a lot of other games. But then like, you know, got a PS3, played Fallout 3, you know, that's another one where I was like, man, video games can have great scope, you know, like I my journey with video games has been kind of my journey just growing up as a person and seeing like the different things that video games can be and do. And so yeah, like my whole life I've kind of just been obsessed and loved video games.
That's awesome, man. So did you ever go back and own the consoles from before you were a kid? So like I started with the NES just because of my age. Did you ever go back and get like a Super Nintendo or an NES and play those?
So yeah, I started off with the N64, and then when I was probably like 7 years old, my sisters got an NES because my sisters were obsessed with Mario 3.
Good, smart sisters. Like, smart.
Yeah, like, you know, yeah, like they had great taste. They only got Mario 3 for the NES. Like I don't know what it was about Mario 3. Well, Mario 3 is an incredible game, but I don't know why they were like obsessed with it per se, but because they weren't really like huge into video games. But yeah, like we owned an NES, and like along with Mario 3, I think we would borrow games from friends. And so like we would borrow Mario 2 and I think it was like a baseball game that like I bought from a friend for $5, and then my sisters made me return it because like I wasn't supposed to like spend that money apparently. I don't know. But yeah, I had an NES, and then other than that, like I had a Super Nintendo emulator that I used to play a bunch of Super Nintendo games. I had Genesis, and I had a cousin with a Genesis, and I'd be over at his place all the time to play like Sonic games and stuff. But yeah, like N64 was my starting point, and I would dip my toe essentially into like the previous console generations from there.
Yeah, I think that's what most people end up doing is wherever they start, once they fall in love, they go back and find a way. I mean, I still play SNES games via emulator to this day on a RetroPie, because it's the easiest way to do it, you know.
And re-releases are amazing too, because like Mario 1 I played via Super Mario Deluxe on the Game Boy, and that was the way that I played that, and I fell in love with that. And then yeah, like there are plenty of games that I played via, like I didn't have a PS1 growing up, but like Metal Gear Solid 1 I was able to play through backward compatibility on my PS3, and then I had a PS2, so I was able to also play a bunch of PS1 games through that also. And so finding clever ways to play older games is always like a great thing.
Yeah, for sure. So how did you get started in the video games podcasting world? How did you go from player, fan, enjoying it as a hobby to wanting to like share that with the world and talk about them?
I think for me it was around 2010, 2011-ish or so when I got a PS3.
Okay.
And I got a PS3 very late. I stuck with my PS2 for like, I guess until like 2010, right? And like, you know, I stuck with that generation for a long while. So that when I finally got a PS3, I got like a summer job and finally had the income to like buy it for myself. When that happened, I think I had a moment of like, all right, I have this new console. I'm super late to it. What do I do now, right? Like, I know I want to play Metal Gear Solid 4. I know I want to, this Fallout 3 game that's on the shelf at GameStop looks cool. Also, Deus Ex Human Revolution looks cool. And also I've been wanting to play this Heavy Rain game. But like, where do I go from here? And I think it was just me, like, you know, always kind of being slightly into video game content, right? Like, I was into video game, like, YouTube, and I would watch, like, Machinima and, like, have, like, a casual interest in Let's Plays and different things, right? Like, I used to be really into actually a series called 10 for the Win, which was on Machinima, and it was, like, I think their names were Steve and Larson. But, like, they had a channel, they had a series I was super obsessed with, but I think it was around the time that The Last of Us was coming out. The Last of Us and BioShock Infinite actually were coming out, where I was like, man, I really want to, I want more content. I want to ingest more stuff that's not just like top 10s, stuff that's not just like Let's Plays. I really want to, I kind of want to dive deeper. And I think that's how I discovered like a Last of Us spoiler cast that Beyond was doing for IGN. And I want to say that's how I started to get introduced to people like Greg Miller and like Colin Moriarty and like other video game personalities that at the time I was like, man, these guys are really talking about video games. Like, I can just sit here and listen to them talk forever, because it was like listening to your friends talk, you know, or like hanging out with friends talking about video games. And so from there, got super into Podcast Beyond, got super into GameScoop, got super into other video game podcasts that I would discover, Giant Bomb, Married to the Games, a bunch of different podcasts. And I think at a certain point, I was just like, man, I want to do this, right? I want to work at IGN. Like I had always had knowledge that IGN existed and that there were video game news, but I didn't know that you could be a personality and like.
It wasn't a place you could actually go.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I always, like, in my mind, like, the idea of writing about video games sounded appealing to me, but the idea of being able to podcast about video games, I think, was the thing where I was like, I really, really want to be able to do that. And so from there, like, at the time I was in college, right? And like, I think I'd already, I think my major was communication. And so that kind of played into the idea of working in games media. And so I kind of try to focus in on that. I try to look more into IGN and kind of like what the different positions were and things I could do, right? I was looking at other sites also. And I think the thing that I kind of came down on, because I'll listen to my favorite podcasters talk about this and explicitly say this, right? Like, I think Greg Miller would be the one to say that, like, hey, if you want to do this full time, then just do it. Like, start it now. Like, make your own podcast, like, build up that skill, because people that are hiring, like, if you're trying to get hired at IGN, people want to see that you have the experience and that you've done this before. And so hearing Greg say that and talk about that made me go like, all right, cool. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to create my own thing. Right. And I think at a certain point, like, Greg and Colin and Tim and Nick had spun off into Kind of Funny. And I think that was like a spark of light where I was like, oh snap, like, I can really just create my own brand and create my own, like, ecosystem in which I can make content. And so from there, like, I ended up making OK Beast, which was my site before I started working at Kind of Funny. I started that in like 2016. Making video essays at a certain point. We started making music at a certain point, right? And like at a certain point, we're just like, yo, let's just have fun with this and make what we want. And through that, our brand kind of grew and grew until, yeah, like, Kind of Funny reached out late last year to see if I wanted to work full time with them, and that's kind of how that happened.
Yeah, that was fun watching you go on I always get it confused with the We Have Best Friends. It's Up and Comers, I believe, is what you went out there for, yes. Right? For like a week or whatever. And we were all of us podcast listeners were like, hey, we want you to be there all the time. What does OK Beast mean? What is that? Where did that name come from?
It literally means nothing. It was one of those things where, like, I was looking, I was trying to find a URL, right? And I was trying to figure out what I want to call my website. And I found that, like, looking around, like, Kind of Funny or Giant Bomb or like any other sort of like site like that, Funhouse, I guess, like Rooster Teeth. I found that all I needed to do was find a good combination of two words and a URL that wasn't taken.
Which is the hard part.
Yeah. And so I was like, all right, like, cool. I just need to put together two words. There's like a hip hop forum or blog, I can't remember which, that's called OK Player that I used to go on, or not even go on. I would like, it'd come up in passing, right? Like rappers would reference it in their songs and stuff, like OK Player. And I kind of like the name of it. And so I was like, man, okay, maybe I could take the OK part of that. And then there was like a rap group that I liked called Humble Beast. And I was like, okay, maybe I can just do OK Beast. Cause I like the word beast. I like the idea of OK at the beginning of a thing. OK Beast. And I looked it up and it was free and it was cheap. And I was like, all right, cool. Did it. Made it happen. And so that's kind of where it came from.
That's awesome. And when you started, was OK Beast like local friends you knew in real life, or did you meet people online? How did you grow your cohorts for that?
So it started off as just me. It was literally just like me being like, all right, I need a centralized place where I put all my creative projects. And so, it was me writing articles. It was me doing like my own interview podcast where I would interview other people. And then I would also like make like video game remixes and like music and stuff and upload it all to the site. A few months in, my friend Ian hit me up, who like he at the time he wasn't my friend. At the time I didn't know who he was, but I guess he had found me through Google by just like Googling like video game reviews and video game articles and stuff, or video game blogs. And he came across OK Beast and he hit me up and he was like, hey man, like I like what you're doing here. Like I want to know how to do this for myself. Like I want to be involved and all that stuff. And as I was talking to him, becoming friends with him, I was also becoming friends with another dude named Alex Van Aken, who I had met in the Kind of Funny Facebook group, because I think we had like similar taste in music. Because I think he actually also liked Humble Beast, which was funny, and which is like a funny thing that I'm just realizing now. Like he was a fan of that same rap group, which is like very much like an underground rap group. Like most people aren't aware of Humble Beast. Uh-huh. And so like, we connected on that level. And then also like he brought me onto his own podcast called Pixel Pulse Radio, that he was recording with his stepdad. And so like I was kind of building these relationships all at the same time. And like quite a few other relationships I was growing within the Kind of Funny community because I was very active in the Facebook group. Like I was an admin at the Facebook group, I want to say in like 2016. And so like, you know, I just ended up meeting a lot of people online. And then like, yeah, a few months in, me, Alex and Ian started an Overwatch podcast that we put on OK Beast. And by like that August, I think August 2016, I hit up Ian and I was like, yo, Ian, let's just do a video game podcast and let's just have you be a part of OK Beast and make this a thing. And then, yeah, like a year later, Alex and Brandon both, because Brandon is Alex's stepdad who he was doing the podcast with. We then brought them on too because like we found that we all kind of work together super well. And so it was very much like a gradual thing of like, all right, like, you know, you're cool, let's work together. All right, no, you're also cool, let's work together. You know what? You know, there's magic here. Let's just take this and move it forward. And that's kind of how that's just how that happened.
That's awesome. It's always fun to find out how podcasters come together because it's not something you can find forums on Reddit where it's like, hey, I'm looking for a co-host. That's usually not how those podcasts will be successful because there's a chemistry that has to be built and it has to be natural for you to be entertaining to listen to. So it's always fun to hear that.
I definitely got super lucky too, because like Ian is very much like a nonsensical, like humorous dude, right? Like dude that like Ian can make a joke out of anything, right? Alex is a very talented, producer and artist and like Alex just has talent. And like, yeah, like we were able to come together and make something special, right? Like Brandon's also like incredible on podcasts too. And so in a sense I was lucky, but yeah, it was also one of those things where I think we saw our talents in each other. And because of that, we're able to, you know, find that chemistry and make things work.
It's great. Well, last question on the get to know you here is I wanted to find out, like, do you have any gaming habits? Like, what are your favorite consoles, what are your favorite genres? Like, what does Blessing do when you're not reviewing games? Because obviously when you're doing this as a job like you are now, you have to play games that you need to play because you have to review them. But in your free time, what does your gaming look like?
I mean, honestly, so, you know, a thing that I think is interesting about my own gaming habits is that, like, if you ask me my favorite genre, I don't think I could be able to tell you. Like, I really don't. Like, I tend to flock to games of, I don't even want to say most genres because I don't even know what that means, but like, I'm pretty good about being flexible in terms of what I play and enjoying whatever, right? Like, I love 3D platformers. Like, some of my favorite games are Mario 64 and like Donkey Kong 64, right? Because those hold a special place in my heart. But also, like, you know, I'll play like a great JRPG and love it. Like right now I'm juggling three different JRPGs and having a good time with them. But like hack and slash games, you know, I'll find time for fighting games. I love puzzle game. Like some of my favorite games are puzzle games. You know, I think of The Witness and Inside and Shadow of the Colossus, which I guess isn't like strictly a puzzle game, but I think of it as a puzzle game. Third person action games. Like really I flow a lot between genres. If you find me like an excellent game, I'll play it. Like it's easier for me to even talk about genres that I'm not into, which would probably be like strategy games. But even there, like I'm sure like if I tried Fire Emblem, I'd probably enjoy it. And so, you know, I tend to just, you know, go with whatever. In my free time, like I'll play a lot of Overwatch because that's kind of like my chill out game. But then like I also like to go back and just play games that I've loved from the past, like whether it be like a Sonic game or, you know, I'll pick something random out of Rare Replay because I just love rare games in general.
Viva Pinata, man. Viva Pinata.
You know what?
I
Viva
love
Pinata
it.
is actually one that I never like fell into. Like I started trying it out when I got Rare Replay, but it was one of those things where I was like, man, I like, you know, my Rare is very much like the N64 and back Rare, right? Like after they got acquired by Microsoft, that's when that like I started to get not that I got lost, but I didn't have an Xbox, and so like I just wasn't able to experience those games. But yeah, in Rare Replay, like I started playing Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, and I was like, man, I really wish I played this at the time because this game has some really cool ideas, and it's actually like a very beautiful looking game, and like the game has excellent writing and excellent humor and all this different stuff. Like I'm like this game is actually fantastic. People don't give it enough credit. But yeah, like I tried Perfect Dark Zero and I was like, I don't know if this is it, Chief. yeah, Viva Pinata is definitely one of those ones where I was like, man, if this hit me at the right time, I probably would have fell in love with this game.
Yeah, it was like my Animal Crossing before Animal Crossing kind of thing for me. Viva Pinata was just that perfect, like, chill,
That makes sense.
fun, colorful, family, hilarious experience. Well, that's awesome. I love to hear that you are into everything. I think I'm the same way pretty much. If it's a great game, I'll play it. And to your point about Fire Emblem, I was diehard not gonna play Fire Emblem last year because I do not like permadeath, and I just didn't want to deal with this long ass RPG that was going to make me do this strategy stuff. Even though I loved like Final Fantasy Tactics and that genre, I played it, my game of the year. It blew me away. Like,
really?
It completely threw me. Yeah, I've put in, combined between mine and my daughter's playthroughs, we put in over 200 hours into multiple playthroughs, and it is phenomenal. So I would, and not necessarily just to tell you to play that, but to make your point of, that's what the awesome thing is about trying games that are in any genre. You just never know when something's going to be amazing and click for you.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's kind of my approach when I play a lot of different games, is like, I'm open to it. I'm down to try it. Like, Telling Lies is a game I played last week, and I loved it, right? But like, if you told me that like you're gonna sit here and just type in keywords and just watch videos, I might be like, I don't know if that's for me, but I'm willing to try whatever when it comes to video games usually.
Well, that's a perfect segue, actually, because I wanted to find out about some of your recent gaming shout-outs. Like, what in the last 6 months have you really enjoyed playing? And it's funny that you mentioned Telling Lies, because I literally, before we got on to record this episode, just hit purchase on my PlayStation to buy it. My daughter's 17, and so I asked her, I was like, hey, do you want me to wait until you're over here next weekend? And she was like, yes. She's a budding game developer. And so we're going to play it together based on your recommendation on the Gamescast I listened to about how it was good to play with a friend. So we're going to do that. We're going to do the Greg Miller thing and like make, charts and notes and just have a blast with it. So maybe that's one of yours, but like, what have you been playing the last 6 months that you really have enjoyed? Yeah,
Telling Lies is definitely one of them. Play that last week, beat it. And it's one of those things where, I had that moment that I have with a few games where, like, I remember playing Shadow Colossus and like finishing it being like, man, video games are cool, right? And I had that kind of same thing when I played Florence on mobile, and I have that same reaction when I play quite a few games. Telling Lies was one of those games. I beat it and I was just like, man, as a medium, video games are capable of telling like such unique stories in such unique ways, and Telling Lies definitely took advantage of what you're able to do with that. And so, yeah, definitely recommend it. I had a ton of fun with it. Actually, I'm trying to think of what other games I played. Persona 5 Royal, I'm playing currently. I am about 20 something hours into it. Really enjoying it. And it's one of those things where I played the original Persona 5 when it came out, and the second time around, playing it now, the Royal version, I'm enjoying it a lot more. Like, I loved it the first time, but the second time it's definitely doing more for me because they've added like just a bunch of small changes around the edges that really, I think, prop the whole game up and contribute to like a much better experience, especially within the dungeons in the combat. And so I've been playing a lot of that. The original Final Fantasy VII, I've been playing about 20 hours into that, and enjoying that as well. Is one of those things where, like, going back to it, especially after playing Remake, it's been a treat to kind of see where those characters are kind of rooted and where the inspiration for Remake came from, and seeing how well they remade that game 1-for-1 in Remake. I thought that was very impressive. And then I'm trying to think of what else I've been playing. Trails of Cold Steel is another one.
What's that one? I don't know.
It's a JRPG. It's part of the Legend of Heroes series. It's a game that our audience, the Kind of Funny audience, recommended to me, because I mentioned that I was looking for JRPGs that are like must-play JRPGs on PlayStation. And basically, you're playing as this character named Reen Schwartzer, and you are a new student at this school. I think it's called the Thor's Academy. And you are put into class 7, which is like this gifted class of students. There's like 9 students in the class, and you all are basically like these gifted students from different backgrounds with like different economic status. And I'm only like 3 hours in so far, but so far from what I've played, I'm really interested in the story. Like, all the characters have great personality. the combat system, or not even the combat system, there is a system called the orbit system in the game, which is very similar to Final Fantasy VII's materia system.
Ooh.
That I find interesting. Yeah. The game takes place in like a fantasy kind of medieval-ish kind of setting, and it has a similar setup as Persona, where it's like you're a student, you take things day by day, and you go around and you kind of I don't know if there's like social links or confidants yet. I'm not that far. For some reason I don't expect there to be, but I don't want to say that outright because I just don't know yet. But yeah, like it's a combination of a lot of games that I love, and so far I've been having a blast with that.
Now I think it's part of a series. I've heard of it, but I just didn't know anything about it. Is this?
Yeah.
Do you know if this is a good jumping on point for people? The one that you're playing?
Well, so as far as I know, right, The Legend of Heroes is the series, but Trails of Cold Steel is kind of a spin-off of it, as I understand. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it is just like an entry in that series. But like, Trails of Cold Steel has like multiple games in it. Like, okay. Right now I'm playing The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 1. But there is Trails of Cold Steel 2, 3, and 4. And yeah, like Trails of Cold Steel 1 is the beginning of this story. And so yes, like it very much like is a good jumping on point, is what I'll say.
And if you do like it, there you are. You've got JRPGs to last you for the next decade.
Oh, dude. Yeah, no, like, if I beat all these games by the end of the year, it's going to be a miracle.
Give yourself a big reward if you do. Something.
For sure.
You gotta celebrate. Because those are three.
I'm going to play a platformer if I beat them all.
That's awesome. Now, did you beat Persona 5 regular? I don't know what we call it now, but regular or original? I
did beat the OG Persona 5 when it came out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm playing Royal as well. That's another one I put in about 20, I put in about 40 hours to the OG, and then I stopped for some reason. Yeah. I don't know why, because I love P4 Golden is like one of my favorite games of all time.
As it should be, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If it got ported to PlayStation 4 or playable on PlayStation 4 or even P5, PlayStation 5, I would be thrilled. Having it kind of locked into the Vita. It's
legit.
So
I was thinking about this legit, like for the last like 2 days of like, one, if they put Persona 3 on modern consoles, I'm playing it immediately.
That too.
Because I've not played Persona 3 and I badly want to play it, but I just don't really have like a way to play it in a way that makes sense right now. But then yeah, like Persona 4, if they release some sort of like new version of it, like Persona 4 Golden again, I'd be all over it. Like, I'd play it immediately. Like,
and it would sell so well.
Yes. Like, people would jump all over that. And so I guess, like, at this point, they probably haven't done it yet because of Persona 5 and because Persona 5 Royal is just coming out. And they probably want to let Persona 5 have its moment. But, like, if they don't take advantage and put out Persona 4 again, oh, man. Or Persona 3, like, oh, man, they're making some mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Well, I've been playing, Spider-Man, to be honest. So I actually finished the main story last night. I've been going back and I got into this platinum thing, and I blame you guys. I blame Greg Miller is who I blame, because after, years of listening to him, I finally just was like, fine, you know what? I'm going to go for these platinums now. And so I went back and I platinumed Ratchet and Clank, which I talked about in my last episode, a series that I absolutely just adore, and had a blast playing through it multiple times with my son. One extra time, in fact, because of a stupid trophy. Oh, it's so annoying. And then I decided like Spider-Man was next, so I picked it back up, and I love this game, man. It is so good. It got me to revisit Into the Spider-Verse, and I'm also a film critic and host a film podcast, and so in my original review, I remember I loved Into the Spider-Verse, but I had a few reservations. Not the case. For some reason, after playing this game, I just fell in love with Into the Spider-Verse even more, and my Miles connection is like off the charts.
That's awesome.
And I need Miles in Spider-Man 2. Like, I need Spider-Man 2 with Miles to be immediately like happening. But yeah, I can't say enough about that game from 2018 and how perfect it allows you to feel like Spider-Man. I mean, it's crazy. Like, but that's what you would need from that game to do first and foremost. Before anything else, you need to feel like you're Spider-Man, and it absolutely nails it. I have so much fun. I'm not a guy who normally likes to change costumes and worry about too many different cosmetic, things that you've unlocked. But in this game, I'm changing my costume like every mission just because I want to see all the different types of Spider-Man stuff. The open world is also something that I typically don't end up sticking through because the games are just so big and they're so full of like collectibles. But this is one where I felt like you could put this game away for a couple weeks and come back to it and really quickly remember the controls and really just be able to jump back in. Whereas I'm also playing Horizon Zero Dawn and I feel intimidated to go back to that after not touching it for like 4 weeks because I'm afraid that I'm not going to know the systems as well and I'm going to get discouraged and then just not keep going. Whereas this one, as you boot it back up, you swing around for a little bit and then it's like your combat, memory comes back really quick. I loved it. I love the way that it feels like kind of like Batman Arkham in the combat as well. And then the story, I love the collectibles. I love reading all the lore and the backpacks you can get. And so for people who have not played it, I cannot recommend this one enough. I think it is well worth whatever the heck they're selling it for now. I mean, it's honestly still worth full price. It's probably a PlayStation Greatest Hits at this point. And so it's on sale for like $20 or something all the time. But man, I don't know. Did you play the new Spider-Man game?
Dude, I loved it. Yeah, it almost like was my game of the year in 2018, right?
Okay.
Like, it was one of those things where I was like, man, I love, like, God of
That was
War.
the God of War year. Oh, that year was brutal.
Yeah, and it was one of those things, and Smash came out that year too, and I think my game of the year might have been Smash, but like, it was one of those things where like, that top 3 was contested for me, because I was like, man, like, God of War is legitimately a force, but like, the amount of fun that I had with Spider-Man, oh man, like, yeah, I'm with you that the gameplay is so good, all the different suits, right, like all the different abilities that come with the suits, like, it made you really care about going through them and actually like equipping them, and playing with them. The story is so good in the game. Like Mary Jane, I think I've cared about this Mary Jane more so than any other Mary Jane, when it comes to Spider-Man. And so like there's that, the villains are great. Like Spider-Man for sure is just an incredible game all around.
Yeah, the villains is one of the places that I think so many, both movies and video games, tend to sort of fail. They just never, there's so many tropes you can put a villain into that kind of make it not interesting, but they give you a real sense of empathy for Doc Ock in this game. And you spend so many hours with him, kind of getting to know him, that it's a different take on that character than I've ever seen before. And I really appreciated that. I totally agree with you on Mary Jane. I went out like hot real quick and bought the Pop Funko figures for both Mary Jane and this Spider-Man because I collect them and I like having them up there on the TV in front of me when I'm playing a game. But I was pretty surprised they even had one for her. But yeah, man, this game it's blown me away and I'm almost to the platinum now. I'm definitely going to knock that out. And then I have the DLC. Have you played the DLC? Do you know if they're worth it?
Yeah. So I played episode 1 of the DLC and I enjoyed it. I'd never finished it just because it was one of those things of like, it's hard to keep going back to a game, like especially like a month out. Like, you finish Spider-Man, you're like, okay, cool. Like I had my moment with this game, and then DLC comes out a month later, and it's like episode 1, and I was like, all right, yeah, I'd like to go back to Spider-Man, right? And I played episode 1, and episode 2 comes out like a month later, and it's like, all right, I guess I'm gonna pick up Spider-Man back up again, and it's like, I started episode 2, and I was just like, I don't have it in me. Like I love this game, but there are other things that are happening, like there are other games that are out that I just want to spend my time with. And so like, I didn't hear amazing things about episode 2 and 3, but like, it's Spider-Man PS4. So at the very least, they're going to be fine. They're going to be good. Like, it's not like they're going to come out and make bad content for it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And I think that I'm just going to keep going for that very reason, because I feel like, once all the DLC's out and you're playing a game, it's kind of a good thing when you're going through your backlog. You have that availability of all the extra content, so you can just kind of roll through it back to back to back instead of having to wait, like you said, and then try to get yourself to go back into that a second time. It's like going through your backlog twice, which is not usually something we're all going to do. Well, the main reason I wanted you on was the theme of this show is the games we love. And so when I asked you what game you would want to talk about, you pretty quickly, without hesitation, said Final Fantasy VII Remake.
I did.
I know you well enough from listening to you to know that this is not about recency bias, which people may be thinking. I'll start with this. What made you choose this as the game you wanted to talk about? What makes it a favorite?
I think for me, this game is, my feelings while playing the game were reminiscent of some of the feelings I had while playing like The Last of Us, toward the end of the PS3 generation. And that's to say that the impact that the story had on me as I was playing, and like just the beauty of the world and the setting and what's going on as you're playing, like I think hit on a deeper level than I've had video games do in a while. And like, yeah, like just overall, right? Like this is probably an example of the game, like the most recent game that has become one of my favorite games. I hadn't played the original Final Fantasy VII, at least like I haven't played past the first couple of hours of the original Final Fantasy VII when I was playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I didn't really know what to expect from it because like I had demoed it before, but like, the demos that I had done for Final Fantasy VII Remake were very much gameplay demos. Like they were very much like I was going through the Mako reactor portions of the game, which aren't really that interesting. All things considered, like with everything that's jam-packed into the game and the diversity of what you're doing and all that stuff. Like the demos I had played of Final Fantasy VII Remake were mainly just all combat and all just like linear combat areas. And so it was one of those things where I was going through the game and I was like, all right, like I'm looking forward to this. I know this is gonna be fun, but like, man, I have however many hours ahead of me, right? Like 30 hours, 35 hours ahead of me, and like let's see how this goes. Let's see if I end up loving this game. And as the game was going, I found myself falling in love with characters in the way that I had fallen in love with characters while playing Persona 4 Golden, which is like my second favorite game of all time. And I found myself getting into the combat system in the way that like this combat system is my favorite combat system that I played in a while. Like, I guess the previous one would have been Astral Chain. I really loved Astral Chain's combat system, but this combat system even more so. Like the materia system, which was present in the original game, but like me actually truly being introduced to it in this game and kind of understanding like how it can vary and the different variations that you can have with it, I thought added a level of depth and player choice that I thought was fantastic, and super fun. The balance of the game like was super excellent with that, and then yeah, like beyond all of that, right? Like the world, the soundtrack, the characters that you meet along the way that are even like not just the main characters, but like the characters that show up for a scene, right? Like there's so many beautiful moments that exist within the game, and I feel like they're drip feeding those moments like throughout the experience. Like I never felt there was never a moment where I was like, oh, this is boring, or oh, I'm not really having fun here. Like it felt like the game was really ushering me from incredible moment to incredible moment to incredible moment in a way that almost felt overwhelming, but at the end of the day was fantastic.
Yeah, the way you describe it, it reminds me, it reminded me of when I was playing it too, of almost like playing an Uncharted game, which is my favorite series of all time, where you're going through somewhat of a linear progression, and it is that cinematic, character-driven storytelling that is driving you from, level to level and from set piece to set piece, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and crazier, and then you'll slow down and have an amazing emotional moment, and then you'll start ramping back up. And it was really weird to have that in a Final Fantasy game or in a JRPG at all, because that's just not how these games are played. They don't typically use that flow.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that impressed me, right? And I think that's the reason why I compare it to The Last of Us. It is an experience that feels accessible, in that feels straightforward and natural as playing a Naughty Dog game, where it is like, hey, no, you're just going through a linear experience, and you're going through the motions of the stories, and you're going through the levels and all this stuff, and you're having a gaming experience that doesn't feel too complicated. It's not turn-based, right? Like there's a whole ATB gauge system, which like it's not super complicated, right? Like it takes a second to learn and to really wrap your head around, but at no point did it feel like it's going to alienate any sort of any type of player. And so you have that, but then also like you have like those story moments that I feel like are going to stick as memorable, like in the way that like Joel driving with Ellie, right, and like having the moment of like, oh man, this magazine is sticky back here. I don't know why that's the cutscene I immediately go to, but like that's like it's like a memorable moment in The Last of Us, right? Like you have, in the way that you have moments like that, I feel like Final Fantasy VII Remake has those memorable moments in the way that, like, you know, when Cloud gets back to Seventh Heaven, the bar, right, and sees Tifa again, and like Barrett Marlene, you know, spots Cloud and gets scared of him, and like Barrett's like, get away from my daughter, right? Like, for me, that's like a memorable moment in a similar way. But then you also have those bigger moments that are bigger than those like those small touches, right? You have the moment of and I guess I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but like you have huge story moments that are impactful, that have consequences, you know, for characters. You have like different big events that are happening in the game that, for me, as they were happening, I was like, yeah, this is something that's going to stick with me, because, like, you know, I really cared about this character, and the arc they're having here is tragic, or the arc they're having here is very good for them, and the way that the game is the way that the game was able to ramp up to it and really deliver and stick those landings, I think, you know, should be commended, because I think the game does an incredible job when it comes to those moments.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I hadn't played FF7 in a long time, so since it came out really on the PlayStation, and so I didn't remember all the details. I remembered, you know, huge plot points involving Aerith, but that isn't really even in this game. And so when a lot of these things were happening, I was still able to feel that same sense of surprise and shock and just be so connected to the characters. Like, it was unbelievable how close I felt to them. You know, in the original game, and you know this now because you've been playing it, but Barrett is a Mr. T like knockoff. I mean, he is intentionally there. It feels like for like comedic relief. And oh my goodness, like when there's an opening scene that I remember so well, one of those big moments that you're talking about, where he's giving a speech, you know, to his fellow cohorts in Avalanche, and I'm just like, man, I'm riled up, I'm energetic, and I'm ready to go. Sign me up, I want to fight. You know, like that to me is an impactful game. Like when it can do that to you and motivate you, then those characters are really, really strongly written.
Yeah, and that's my thing too, is that like it doesn't feel, I feel like for a lot of JRPG stories, like things don't feel as specific. Like I'm playing Persona 5 Royal, like I mentioned earlier, right? And like, you know, the story is all about and this is going to sound ridiculous as I say it, but it's about high schoolers, teenagers that infiltrate the hearts of corrupted adults in order to change their cognition so that they have a change of heart, right? And it's like, what does that even mean? I feel like for a lot of, and granted, like when you kind of break it down, Persona 5 is meaningful, right? And it does actually, like, you know, get deep in terms of, you know, exploring characters and exploring like the human heart and all this different stuff, right? But I feel like oftentimes it's hard to really, JRPGs don't necessarily dig deeper in terms of like politics and activism. Like you get that every now and then, but even Final Fantasy VII Remake, in the way that, you know, it takes those elements, right? It takes Avalanche, which is a terrorist group, right? And their whole shtick is that they're trying to save the world and stop Shinra, you know, because they're killing the world by taking its energy, right? By taking the Mako energy, right? The way that Barrett really delivers that speech in that first chapter of the game and really like makes you understand and feel for his cause in a way where you're like, yeah, no, I understand. Like, I understand why this activist dude is, you know, over the top. Like, I understand why he's super passionate about this thing, because like what he's saying, if what he's saying is correct, like it makes sense. And, you know, you kind of get why he's him and why he cares. But then you look at Cloud and you're like, yeah, I also get why this guy just wants his money and doesn't care, you know, doesn't even like barely wants part in this, but just wants to get paid. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake does an excellent job of taking that and really like making it work in a game that feels like it's also meant to, I want to say, be mainstream, which I don't know if that's the way
I think
the word
it
I'm
is.
looking for.
Yeah.
But
It's supposed to be, for sure.
Yeah, like Final Fantasy VII Remake is definitely a game that is supposed to appeal to a broad audience, and it, for all intents and purposes, I feel like is supposed to be watered down a bit, you know, in terms of the things that it's tackling, so that like people can get into it and have a good time and you know, not be challenged in any sort of way. I think what is actually there and what they actually present, you know, is challenging in a way that, you know, it kind of has its cake and eats it too, where like, you get those broad strokes of this is what Avalanche is doing, this is why it matters, this is why this is what's going on with the world, these are the complications of like when Avalanche blows up a reactor, these are the repercussions, but then also this is the bigger picture that you have to look at, right? Like, I think they present that in a way that they have their cake and eat it too, and you kind of get what they're going for here, and it actually sticks and hits.
Yeah, the gray area is one of my favorite things to explore in a game or movie or any sort of medium, and that they do that. They make you wrestle with the choices the characters are making, and I think even more so, what's important is they make the characters wrestle with it, not just you as the game player or the audience, but like about that because the characters are struggling to figure out like, am I doing the right thing? And it's not even like overblown or overdramatic in a sense. Like it feels very natural. And I think you're right. I think it felt to me like it was trying to bridge that gap between broad audience and people who quote unquote like JRPGs, because JRPGs comes with this whole baggage attached to it. Like, oh, that's that old style of game with 8-bit and turns, like that's what people think still to this day. And so, or that's just anime craziness, which thankfully this game does not do until its last couple chapters. And then it definitely gets anime as whack. What did you think about that? What did you think about, obviously without spoilers, but I guess, did the ending work for you once it got a little bit less grounded, I would say?
Mm-hmm. I have a love-hate relationship with the ending because, towards the end, like things start to get crazy in a way where, the whole game up to a certain point feels straightforward and understandable, and it's like, I understand these characters, I understand their motivations, I understand what's going on, I understand that these guys are the bad guys and they need to take them down. And I like, for me as somebody who didn't play the original Final Fantasy VII, I was like, I get what's going on throughout this whole experience. And then like towards the end they start to muddy the waters a bit in terms of no spoilers, but like, it goes in a very like anime-ish direction. And my love-hate relationship with it does come down to like, I understood it more when I talked to people who played the original Final Fantasy VII. And when I talked to them about it, I came away being like, all right, that's the coolest thing ever. Like, that is actually really dope, and I can't believe they're able to like, do this thing. But at the same time, for me, coming into Final Fantasy VII as a newcomer, the ending of the game just didn't make sense to me. And so I don't like the idea that I have to either talk to somebody or like, go back and play the original game in a game that you're presenting as like a fresh start. That said, like, I think I come out of it with a net positive of being like, well, with everything kind of understood, and now that I'm playing like the original game, and now that I've talked to people who have played the original game, like, I look at the ending and it's like, all right, like you guys are doing cool shit, and that's really dope.
Yeah. So what are you thinking now then about the future of this? Because this is obviously part one of X amount. We don't know yet for sure how many, maybe a trilogy, maybe more. We don't know, but are you hyped for them in a way that you weren't before?
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely excited. I think I do have a tinge of like, will they be able to stick the landing like they did with this first game? Like, how do they go from here? I think that actually, honestly, the thing that really like makes it curious now that I'm playing the original game is knowing that by the time you finish Final Fantasy VII Remake, right, like you are hitting that point where you're going into the open world in the original game, and I'm like, dude, how are they going to do that? Because playing the original game, the game is way bigger than Midgar. The game is way bigger than that starting area that Final Fantasy Remake 1 takes place in. And so like, are they gonna go open world? Like, how are they gonna attack? There's like a story event that happens too, like after the open world. Like, I'm curious to see like how they tackle that, what percentage of the game that's gonna be, because like, all things considered, right? Like if the ratio is similar to how they tackled Final Fantasy VII Remake, how much of that game takes place, or how much of that game takes place, I guess, in the original game, right? Like, does that mean the next portion that comes after is going to be like 5 hours? Like, what does that look like? I just have so many questions. That is like excitement for the game to come out, but excitement as far as like, how do you do this? How do you go on? Like, how do you move forward? That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's going to be something sort of like Uncharted Lost Legacy, where there's more that there's some linear parts to it, and then like in the middle of that game, there's this really random at the time feelings this big open world area where you can just all of a sudden like run around in and do all this stuff. And I wonder if it's going to sort of maybe feel like that, where you had this linear first game and the second game is sort of basically a different style of game. It's the only way that makes sense in my head. So I guess we'll find out. I'm so glad you love this. Are you going to platinum it? Are you going to keep going, you think, and try it on hard mode?
So the platinum, the trophy that's making me doubt the platinum is that hard mode, trophy. Like, especially because you can't use items.
Yeah.
And so like, that's the thing where I was like, I don't know if I have it in me to play this game on a harder difficulty without being able to use items. Like, items were like my saving grace in the normal difficulty. And so that to me is kind of out of reach. If that hard mode difficulty wasn't a thing, I probably would have put platinum this game.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've I've beaten 3 chapters on hard mode, and it's been extremely different. I'll tell you, it is a challenge. Like, it is legitimately, like, you got to earn this one, which is not always my favorite. I like the ones that are just like gimmies. But
exactly.
But yeah, no, but it is fun to play back through it, and I think that it's holding up again for me, which is really important on like a game that's going to be on my favorite games list. Is that something that you replay your favorite games often? I think you mentioned you do like to go back to stuff.
Yeah, like it depends on the game, but like nowadays it's not even as often as probably as I'd like it to be, but definitely older games, like I'll go back to replay. Like, it's harder for me to replay a modern game, depending on what the game is, but yeah, like I'll go back and play like a Sonic or like a platformer or like a game from the PS2 era. Like, those types of games I'll play. I guess Shadow of Colossus is a game that I'll play just infinite times. Like, that's just a game I like to boot up. And now that the PS4 version is an option, you know, that's the version I'll kind of go back to because that's like a classic game for me. But I'm sure this game in particular, I'm sure I'm going to go back to at some point. Like, The Last of Us is a game that I played 2 or 3 times. I want to say 3 times since it's come out, and I feel like Final Fantasy VII Remake is probably going to be the same thing, where like a couple years from now I'm going to just want to experience the story again.
At the very least, before the next part comes out, just to kind of get refreshed, probably.
Yeah, for sure.
It's funny you mentioned Shadow of the Colossus, because another one I literally downloaded only yesterday in order to go through that, because I have not played the original, and I had a family friend who was like, dude, this is my favorite game ever. You have got to play Shadow of Colossus. He's like, I'll come on your podcast and talk about it. And I was like, all right, well, let me play it first and see what I think. But so I'm glad to hear you give high praise to it too.
Oh yeah, definitely play Shadow of Colossus if you're listening to this.
Well, thanks, man, for being here. I really appreciate it, and it has been a blast talking to you, getting to know you. I just have no doubt that the listeners are going to enjoy this, and they're going to want more of you if they are just finding out about you for the first time. So where can they listen to you on your podcasts? Plug anything you want. Twitter handles, whatever you want to plug it now.
You can follow me on Twitter at Blessing Jr. That's at Blessing Jr. And yeah, I'm on PSLW XOXO every week. That is Kind of Funny's PlayStation podcast. It's me and Greg Miller talking about PlayStation, talking about the news, all that good stuff. And so tune into that if you're curious about PlayStation. Other than that, I'm on Kind of Funny Games Daily, which is a daily news show for video games. That's on youtube.com/kindoffunny, twitch.tv/kindoffunny, youtube.com/kindoffunnygames, and twitch.tv/kindoffunnygames at 10 a.m. live. And so I'm on that at this point most of the time. And so check me out there also.
Awesome. Well, listeners, if you like what you heard here, please subscribe. We're still new. This is season 1. We're getting going, but we want you to share us with your friends. Follow us on social media on @TheGamesWeLove on Twitter, or you can follow me personally at Aaron L.E.L. White. I also stream on Twitch weekly, often open world games that are perfect for drop-in viewing. I'd love to have you follow and come chat where we can talk about your favorite games, movies, or anything else that makes you happy. You can find me at twitch.tv Aaron L. White. We have conversations coming soon with more amazing folks such as YouTube film critic Jeremy Johns, GameSpot editor and podcast host Jacob Decker, former IGN host and the History and Games podcast host Megan Sullivan, and more. You are not going to want to miss these. Leaving a 5-star review will also help us to grow and get noticed and would be much appreciated. But thank you, Blessing, for joining me to talk about your journey and games. It's been a blast, dude. And thank you everyone so much for listening, because this is for you. We'll be back soon, but until next week, get out there and fall in love with the game.